Hello dear friends. Welcome back to my channel. Today let's continue this story. It was a bright noon under the blazing sun in a peaceful mountain village. The wind gently rustled the leaves, and cicadas hummed in chorus as if welcoming the presence of someone new. The dirt path, lined with wild grasses and red earth, led to a humble home tucked deep among the hills. That day, James, young, wealthy, and raised in the heart of a bustling city, set foot in this quiet place for the first time. Carrying with him both curiosity and something even he didn't fully understand, longing. Their story didn't begin with grand declarations or chance encounters in glamorous places. It started with a girl named Tu Diep, a quiet soul with gentle eyes, who once helped James when he got lost in the forest during a business trip gone astray. From that moment, something about her lingered in his mind. Maybe it was her simplicity, maybe it was her calm strength, or maybe it was the way she made him feel like the world could slow down and breathe. She greeted him that day with a soft smile and the kindest voice. "Thank you all for caring about me and James. I hope you enjoy this video and relax." There was no fanfare, no formality, only sincerity. The day began with something James had never done before: chopping firewood. What was an ordinary chore for Diep was an entirely new challenge for him. As they walked along a trail leading into the woods, James, panting and wiping sweat from his brow, said, "You said it was nearby. But this is quite a hike." Diep chuckled but didn't tease. She simply picked up a bundle of dry wood and carried it with ease. James struggled, his hands, used to signing contracts and typing on laptops, now gripped an axe awkwardly. He tried to cut large branches but quickly tired. Still, he kept going. He didn't want to look weak in front of her, not because of pride, but because he admired her more than he expected. Together, they bundled the firewood. James fumbled with the rope while Diep showed him how to tie it securely for carrying on the back. He learned how villagers gway wood on their shoulders using simple, worn-out straps. Though his clothes were damp with sweat and his muscles ached, he said with a forced grin, "It's nothing, I'm a man, after all." By midday, they sat in the shade to rest. Diep poured him a cool drink. He glanced at her, surprised by how calm she was. "You're not tired?" he asked. "I'm used to it," she replied. "I've lived in the countryside my whole life." James nodded, silent. His world was all boardrooms and deadlines. But here, among trees, smoke from the kitchen, and the presence of one humble girl, he felt grounded. Later, they returned home. Diep cooked. She stir-fried pumpkin leaves with garlic and fried eggs fresh from her garden. James helped weed her small vegetable patch, sweating under the sun but smiling. At some point, as she cooked beside him, he said almost to himself, "This feels like a dream." She looked up, puzzled. "What kind of dream?" He hesitated, then said, "A small house, some chickens, you, and me, a quiet life, nothing fancy." Diep blushed and turned away. Maybe she had dreamed the same thing. Once, over lunch, James suddenly asked, "What do you think is the ultimate goal in life?" Diep thought for a moment. "To be healthy, make enough money, and have a family, a home." He smiled. "That's a good answer. But I think it's all about happiness. Health brings happiness, money brings happiness, but most of all, knowing when you have enough, that's happiness, too." He shared with her how his business once made 10 billion a year. And then he wanted 100 billion. And then more. No matter how much he achieved, it was never enough. But he realized something. A blind person would give anything just to see light. Someone missing a hand would feel joy just to hold something again. Knowing you already have enough, that's happiness. Diep quietly nodded. She had never heard it said like that before. After the meal, she unconsciously prepared a third bowl of rice. Then she froze. "I forgot, hockey isn't here anymore." James looked at her in silence. She was still holding onto the habit of caring for someone who was gone. It touched him more deeply than he expected. "You said I had to be strong, right?" she whispered when she saw his eyes welling up. "I'm not crying," he said with a sad smile. "I'm just moved by you, by how much love you still carry." Afternoon fell. James had to leave for work back in the city. He stood up reluctantly. "I'll come back tonight," he promised. Diep said nothing, only nodded. As he turned to go, she ran after him. handing him the jacket he had left behind. "I know I'll be sad," she said softly, "but I'll be strong." He looked at her, held her hand gently for a brief second, and said nothing. Their eyes met. In that silence was a promise. Not spoken but felt deeply. And that was how their story truly began, not with a kiss. Not with a confession, but with the weight of a firewood bundle. A bowl of rice once meant for someone else. And a shared dream of a quiet, simple life under the same sky.